Hello again, everybody. I'm Larry Hamilton. Welcome to my YouTube painting studio. Thank you for watching. Today we're going to do a watercolor painting, and it's a fall scene, an autumn scene. It's called Autumn Road, and the photograph I'm using is courtesy of a lady named Janet Herman, who's on the Photos for Artists Facebook page, where a lot of artists get their inspiration, get their photos to use, and there's no charge for that. We'll be painting on 300-pound Fabriano Artistico watercolor paper today, cold press paper. And the references for these, three references for this photograph are out on my website. There are links down below this video that you can go get them for your use. All right, so I want to go to my computer. I don't have a lot of photos. I just want to show you a couple things I did and describe what I'm going to try to do with this photograph today. And so hold on, I'll be right back. Okay, so here I am at my computer, and I'm showing you the original photo that we got. It's a portrait format instead of landscape, so that means it's taller than it is wider, as you all know, I'm sure. Interesting about this, has some bright colors, really nice fall colors. It has some nice shadows, which I like. It doesn't have a lot of depth, and it doesn't have necessarily a clear focal point. So I'm going to try to keep that in mind as we go through this and try to make a little more of a focal point there in the lower right quadrant of this, and maybe add a little more depth by making some of the trees in that area a little bit lighter, and a little bit bluer maybe. I also have it in a black and white format. Instead of doing a value map, this is sort of my value map equivalent, I guess. I just take the same photo and take all the color out of it, and gives me a nice black and white image. It shows me where the darkest darks are and where the lightest lights are. And then lastly, I use my favorite tool called griddrawingtool.com. It's a nice little website where you can just upload your photos one at a time, and you can correct them, you can adjust them, and then you can lay a grid over them in whatever format you want. This one is 4 squares by 5 squares. That's my typical size for a 11 by 14 piece of watercolor paper. So you can see the grid here, what it looks like. And as I started, I don't really have a sketch for this, so I'm going to show you what I did with this when I get back to the easel. So that's all I want to show you here on the computer, and I'll go back to my easel now and we'll get started on this. Okay, I'm back at my easel. So I didn't really do a sketch. I basically took just a basic pencil here, and I used the grid and kind of looked at one of the interesting things about this particular photograph is that the road is in really the lower 1/5 of this particular painting. It's really shallow. It goes like this and like that, and so that was a bit of a surprise. If I had tried to sketch this by just looking at the photo, I would have probably put the back of this road way up here, and it would have been wrong. So this gives a lot of perspective and helps the depth, help you see the depth. That's really all I have. The road sketched in. I have a few verticals here. I want some of the bigger trees. And that is it for a sketch. You really don't need much of a sketch in this particular photograph anyway. So let me go down back to my palette, and I'll go through the brushes and paints, and we'll tell you what we're going to paint with today. Okay, so here's my Sterling Edwards watercolor palette, and you see I have my paints arrayed around there. I'll tell you what those are in a second. I have my brushes, my Sterling Edwards bristle brushes. I have 2 big ones here that are very short, stubby bristles that are really good for blending and moving paint around. I have a couple of flats, a number 1-inch flat and a 1/2-inch flat. I have about 3 rounds here. I have a number 12, number 8, and a number 4. And then I have a script liner for the fine details. Also, you see on here I have a couple of sponges. I'm going to talk you through a little bit of a technique that you can use to paint some of these leaves on trees when you get into paintings like this, where you need some very light wispy type of leaves, and this photo kind of makes it ideal for that. I also have an extra sheet of paper up here on my board that I can kind of demonstrate that before we do it. So I'll put those over here for now, and I'll go around the palette here, and I'll go through the paints. The colors, these are Holbein, very transparent Holbein colors, Japanese colors. Here we have Payne's Gray, cobalt blue, ultramarine deep. We have royal blue, very dark blue. We have permanent violet, green gray, umber, burnt sienna, quinacridone scarlet, bright rose, brilliant orange, quinacridone gold, permanent yellow deep, and we have lemon yellow, cad lemon yellow. So that's the paints. I don't know if I'll use all of them. I don't know if I'll use all the brushes, but that's what we have to work with. So I'm going to get my cameras adjusted here, and we'll get started on this. I'm going to move this in so you can see as much as you can. There we go. Okay, so I have several cameras running here, and I'll try to let you see as much as I can. If I miss something or if I step in front of the paper here so you can't see it, I have another camera over on the side here that's kind of taking an angled shot, so I can edit that when I finish finish editing the video when we're finished. I should also say that if you see the chat window here on the side of your computer, you can type something in there and ask me questions. I see we've got somebody from Australia, somebody from Costa Rica, and somebody from India so far. Well, that's wonderful. Welcome, you all. And please put your questions or comments in there for me, and I'll try to answer them. I have a computer up here by my easel, and I can see who's writing what or asking questions. And so let's get going. I'm going to do this, try to do this a lot wet in wet. So I'm going to put on a good coating of clear water here, and we'll get this paper nice and wet. This is 300-pound paper. I think I told you that. And and I'm using this bristle brush to put this paint on, or this clear water, so you're not going to see any color here. I'm just wetting this 300-pound paper. This paper holds a lot of water, and it will, because it's so heavy, the reason I like the 300-pound is that it's really heavy and it tends not to buckle. 140-pound paper will tend to buckle, even if you tape all four sides down. This gets a little loose in the middle. You can see maybe it's moving there a little bit, but nevertheless, it's going to hold better and be stiffer than a 140-pound piece of paper. Okay, so I've got that pretty wet. I think there's maybe a few spots in there that are not covered yet. But anyway, so you see there's almost no sketch, clear water, and we're going to start, because this is such a bright painting. I'm going to put some colors here in my palette, and I have some nice color to work with here, and put these two yellows in. I got the cad lemon yellow, and this palette that Sterling Edwards created here has a lot of nice wells that are good for a big brush like this. If you can see what I'm doing here, I'm just getting this paint out of the paint well and making a nice little puddle of it here. I'm going to use this quinacridone gold, which looks brown in the palette, but when you put it on, it has a very gold color, which is very nice for fall type scenes. These are all transparent again, as I've told you. And I'm going to put on my brilliant orange. So between these number of colors and maybe a little bit of my burnt sienna and a few greens, I can really make all kind of greens with this. I have 3 blues, and I have a purple, and I can make all kind of green colors with this for the trees. So I may show you that in a little bit, but I wanted to get this thing good and wet, and I'm going to go back now and just put another little slight, picked up a little orange in my brush. See that? I didn't get it all cleaned out, did I? Oh, no problem. This has a nice undertone of orange to it, and let's put another very light coat of close to clear water, I should say. It's not completely clear, but you see a little tone in it. You probably can't even see that tone. I have a monitor behind me. I can go back and look and see what you're seeing, hopefully, and you can't even see that tone on there probably. All right, so that paper is good and wet, has a nice glisten on it, and I've got my colors set up here. So I'm going to still use this big medium brush. It's like about a 2-inch brush, and I'm going to come back and start putting in some of these colors. I think I want to put in just a little bit of cobalt blue, very light cobalt blue in some areas. So we have a little bit of sky in here, not much, but just a few places. I want a little of this in some areas, and the rest is going to be our orange colors. And because the paper's wet, that's going to really lighten up a lot. These colors lighten up by at least 20–30% when they dry out. So I'm going to look for that. And so I'm going to come in and put in a few light yellows. This is that quinacridone gold. Look at it. It's a really bright yellow color. And I'm just going to put a real light covering of it in here in some areas, leave some whites in there. But I'm going to come down and fill in areas here, leave a little of the blue for some sky. But you see that blue is already fading out, and put a little orange. Give me a little bit of this brilliant orange in here. Start coming down in some areas. I don't know how long it's going to take to do this painting. It's probably not going to take as long as I thought it would, but no matter, we will put this in, leave some holes in there. I want to try to leave this area down here. I'm going to try to lighten this up so that I have some area for to give it some depth. So I'm going to try to leave that area white, leave a little white up in here. Maybe come back and touch a few more yellows. Take this yellow, this permanent yellow deep, and put a few spots in here of it. So we're just laying in an underlying kind of a block-in layer, I guess you'd call it. Let this dry out here on this side. I want that to dry out, so I've got some place to put some very light. I'll probably use my sponge in this area over here after a while. And back here, I want this to fade out. This is going into the background here, so I'm going to try to leave that open as much as possible. Put on some bright yellow down here, maybe even some lemon yellow, mix it in. Even some going across here like this. All right, so I've got a kind of an interesting set of colors on here that are going to, I have a really odd shape white here, and that's intentional. I have an odd shaped white here. So these abstract shapes help give you something to look at. You don't want to just have a circle or a square or rectangle. That's not a good composition idea. Wiping off this paint that's on the top here, it will tend to run down and run over your painting if you're not careful. All right. Again, let me know if you have any questions or comments or something you don't understand. So I'm letting that kind of soak for a few minutes here while I chat and talk. But this big bristle brush puts a lot of paint on fast, and kind of like the way it looks. I'm going to pick up now my, let's see here, I think I've got a pretty good background. This is not bad. I could probably put just a little more of this quinacridone gold in there in some spots. Got some spots that float through there like that. Okay, just don't want to lose where my road goes out of the picture there. Okay, so that's the background blocking in. But you see how much lighter it's drying. I put that orange on. It really looked way too orange almost, but it's really lightening up, and you can see how it dries probably 20–30% lighter than than what we put on. Okay, I'm going to get my smaller brush now. I have a 1-inch bristle brush. And I'm going to come back and see if we can add a few more of these colors. Get a little darker, more concentrated color in some of these areas by just putting another layer on. Get it down here in my palette. I'll show you what I talk about when I say the paint is drier. I have a really wet mixture here. It's got a lot of water in it, but down here when I have water on the paper like I have now, and I want to put some more of that color on to darken it down, I want a mixture that when I run my finger through it like this, it leaves a opening, and you can see that that's drier paint. It's still wet, of course, but it's a lot drier than this liquid stuff that's over here on the side. So I've got a thicker version of this orange paint, and we're going to start putting some of that in here like this, running it up there. And I'm not trying to paint these trees yet. I'm just sort of putting in some more blocking to make it a little darker. The sun, I think, is probably coming from the left side. You see the shadows in the photograph. The sun is coming from the left, so we'll have shadows that go across this road down here. So I want these things to be darker on the right side over here, and they're going to be lighter on the left side. But so by using this thicker paint, I can keep painting and not get blossoms and backgrounds. If I put this really wet paint from over here in there, because that's wet, it'll just blossom and it will make an ugly looking thing that I don't want to have. So let's do this. Put a few more things in here like that, and leave that. We'll come back and start getting some other of these colors over here. We've got some more of this yellow. I'm going to get do the same thing with my permanent yellow deep, and get some more of these darker colors in here. Just put them in and kind of let them go wherever they will. And again, we're still underpainting here pretty much. I've got some places down here where I want this color. And over in here. So at some point I'm going to stop looking at the photograph and just start looking at the painting and start seeing what it needs, instead of trying to copy. I'm not trying to make an identical copy or a photorealistic copy. I stopped doing that a long time ago, and I found out it takes so long to do those kind of things that they're hardly worth the time and effort for me unless I'm trying to be photorealistic, which I don't want to be. Okay, so let's see if I can put a few more of these bright yellows. Get me a bright yellow mixture going here that's got a lot of paint in it. And so you can see again, if I show you how this paint looks on the palette, if I run my finger through it, you're going to see that it's a lot thicker because I'll leave a trace, leave an opening. It's hard to see it on the camera, I see, but it leaves an opening when I do that. So I'm going to come in here and put a few more of these in. It's just adding some darks, adding some more flavor to this, texture to this. Okay, so let's just do that. Where else? I've got this bright yellow back here in this area. I see some yellow sticking through. I'm going to take some more of that yellow and start putting a little bit of it in here. Just kind of fill out that white clear area back there. And there's some in here. Okay. All right, that's sort of a second pass with a little bit thicker paint from the basic blocking in. Now I think it's at a point where probably I need to dry it a little bit, and because I'm going to start coming back with some other colors, and I don't want those to blend necessarily. There are some greens in here I'm going to put in, but I'm going to try to put them right over that. I can put it over that if I dry this paper. So I'm going to turn on my hairdryer, turn off my microphone so I don't blow your ears out, and I'll be back in a second. Okay, I'm back. So I've dried this for a minute or two. Still feels a little wet in some spots. If you put the back of your hand on it, it feels cold, it's still wet. If it feels warm or room temperature, it's fairly dry. So I'm going to leave that set there for a second. I want to bring you over here to this other piece of paper I have, and I want to show you what I'm going to explain a couple things that we're going to work on here. Let me get, if I can get my camera, my main camera set up over here and zoom it in to this particular piece of paper. There. All right, so two techniques that I want to show you, and one is negative painting, which you've heard me talk about before, and the other is this use of sponges for stippling. So let me start here. I'm going to show you just a little bit of a technique here for making this negative painting. I'm going to use these are like, I got a couple of sketches here that look like they could be trees. So I've got one tree. I'm going to, you see, I'm going to get a round brush. I think it's probably easier to show you real quickly here. While this is still drying over here, if I take a brush and do this, I get more water in it than that. But if I come in here and just do this, put a mark like that, that's called a positive image, positive tree. Means it's painted on top of what's there. Okay, so you can have positive painting and negative painting. This can have branches on it and whatever. And it looks fine. It also doesn't look like it's connected to the ground below. So I'll probably put a few things down here to connect it to the ground. But basically that's a tree. And if I just keep pulling it on up, I can pull it right on out of the page here, which is interesting. So there's a positive tree. So what's a negative tree look like? Well, I've got a sketch over here. So I'm going to use my 1-inch flat, and I'm going to show you how we can make a tree look appear even though it's not there. I'm going to take a lot of this like this and like this. Okay, and I'm taking these colors, I'm just kind of adding whatever's in my palette here. And if I run it up like this and run it on off the paper, you can see that I've got a tree that is there, but I didn't paint a tree. And then I can use my 1-inch brush with a little bit of water in it, clear water, and I can just soften this edge out here and blend this into whatever's around it. That's what these brushes are really good for, blending like this, where you just sort of come in and fill it in like that. And all of a sudden I've got a tree. I didn't paint a tree, but I painted everything around it. And so this is called a negative painting. And the thing I didn't do was like leave a branch or something on here, so I can come in and take clear water and pull out some paint that makes it look more like it's got something on it. I didn't do that exactly right. I have a better technique for doing this. But this is the idea of a negative painting. So what does the sponge bring to us? Well, there are a lot of different sponges, artist sponges. Oops, I dropped my brush. Hold on here. And they have different levels of holes in them. They have a different texture. This has a very fine number of holes. It's a sort of a fine sponge. Here's one that has bigger holes and bigger texture. And here's even a different one with a more different texture. So what you can use these for, and you may have seen people do it, but if they haven't, I want to show you here how we take a sponge like this, and I want to put some, this is kind of dry, almost dry already, but I want to put some leaves in there with this sponge. Sponge is fairly dry. I'm going to just get some of this orange on here like this and stipple it like that. Okay, so you can make these things. It gives you the type of texture that you want, which is sometimes a little easier to do than doing it with a brush. Some of this can be done with a brush, but you got to be very careful with how you use the brush. So that's using the sponge to put on a lot of leaves, and they give this really, because of the nature of the way this is, it's like a brush. It's really fine and flaky out here. So that's a technique that you can get these artist sponges at most art stores. BLICK has them, but you can experiment with that. And then I also have, you can use a brush like this, just a round brush. Instead of stippling, it's called scumbling. It's the same idea of just using like the side of the brush, get a bunch of paint in there, and just sort of you use the side of the brush instead of the top, and that gives some very nice effects as well. So I use the brush more often than I use a sponge, but I wanted to show you how that sponge would work and how the brush works a little differently. But you got to use the brush right. You got to almost lay that brush down and scumble with the side of it, and then you get these really nice airy type leaves on a tree. So that's kind of the idea here that I wanted to show you and give you some techniques for doing a negative painting of a tree, positive painting, and then the use of sponge and scumbling with a brush to get some of the leaf patterns. That's always hard for people to do. I've had people practice that in classes before, and it's really difficult. Okay, so let me get back to our original paper here and zoom back a little. And it should be really nice and dry right now. If I can get it lined up for you all there. All right, so now that's the tutorial part of today. Hope you like that. I hope you learned something, and hope you give that a try. All right, let's go. We're going to work on this now and start working on some of the trees. These trees that run through here. It feels just slightly damp, but I think it's pretty well dry. So I'm going to start getting some of this brown, get some of my browns, get my burnt sienna here, and mix it with a little bit of this orange, maybe whatever I got in the palette. Get a nice brown, but I also want a gray, so I'm going to use a little bit of my cobalt blue, which I already used. I'm going to mix that with some of this brown and see if I can get a sort of a gray color. Burnt sienna and a blue will give you an interesting brownish gray. If I use ultramarine with that, I get a different color of gray. I don't know if you can tell that in the palette here, but this gray with ultramarine has a different color than the one with cobalt blue. Cobalt blue has some green in it, so this has a bit of a green tint. Ultramarine has a bit of purple in it, so this has more of a bluish purple tint to it. Okay, so let's take this and let's come in here and see if we can put in some of these, this sort of this gray tree going up here. Okay, so I'm just going to, this is positive painting again here. I'm not doing negative painting everywhere, but I am trying to get a tree in here that's got some texture to it and leave some holes in it. This thing goes all the way out the top. So if I get some of the gray, I'm going to come up here and just kind of just lay this thing in. I'm hitting and missing. I'm not hitting everywhere. I'm sort of hitting and then missing because I'm going to put some other leaves back over that and let the leaves fill in some of the gaps. So that's one tree. There's hundreds of trees back in here. I mean, I can put a number of them down and let you see what they look like here if I just put them in the ground. And again, you want to sort of leave, this flat brush is good for this kind of thing because it gives you nice straight edges here. I'm not going to put in every tree, but I'm going to put a bunch of them. So let's just come down and keep trying different things. Get a little more gray in here. And if there's anything darker, it should be on the right side, simply because whatever light we got coming in here is coming from the left. So let's do that and put a few of these in. And that's with a flat brush. You can also use the round brush, what I do with it, to do something very similar. Over here on the other side, I'm going to pick a few more places to put in. It's like a big tree here. We've got several trees that run alongside. So if I use this and just sort of hit and miss with it like this, take it right off the top, make it a little bit bigger. It's a little bit too narrow. Put a little darker brown in there, darken this right side down. Like this. Okay, there's a number of them over here. So I'm doing all positive trees right now. So I'm going to leave some room for some negative trees because I want to demonstrate that again to you. But hi folks, I'm Susan B. Welcome. Okay, glad you're here. So we're just sort of putting in some trees into this, around this autumn road. And I want to let them go like that, and then you can also get some dry brush. This see how much this is lightened up already? It was very dark a while ago when I put that on. So you can always come back and put a little more dark on the one side here, and try to get it to made it just a little thicker, pull some things out here. But the interesting thing is what we can do with some of the other colors here when we start painting some negative shapes. I'm just using ultra blue and a little bit of burnt sienna. Okay, and then got a couple in here. I'm just going to leave a few of these streaks in here to show that we've got some other trees going on. All right, in here there's a whole string of trees in here. I'm going to use my little round brush because they're smaller, and I'm going to get some of this darker color here, maybe a little bit. I want it to be a little darker as we go back. Actually, let's see here. There's some that are really this number 4 round kind of does it. So there, okay. We've got a bunch of branches and stuff on here that kind of hang on. Put this in and put these out. So I paint vertically. A lot of painters paint horizontally. So I have to worry about water running and a lot of other things. What I didn't do is like take the bottom of these trees right here and sort of soften this edge right here. So this bristle brush, I can come back and start hitting some of the bottoms of these and kind of blending them into the paper, if you will. You just don't want to have a sharp edge on the bottom of these trees. You want them to be look like they're part of the landscape and not something else, not glued on anyway. So that's a start for this. All right, now I'm going to take my half-inch brush here, and I'm going to start putting in now some of these other colors here that we've been using before. This orange, brilliant orange, and this yellow. I'm going to start getting a little darker color, adding a little bit of my burnt sienna to it, and coming in here and starting to put in some dark areas that are going to give us a going to help define this, but it's going to also give us some more trees. So watch how this works. So I'm going to put in a thing like that, and all of a sudden you've got another tree running up here that's got some branches on it, and I'm going to run into another tree over here that goes this way. Like that, and I'm going to run that right into this guy's over here. Okay, so you're seeing now some how this negative painting works when you start adding it. And then you want to come in and soften a few of these edges here so that you don't have hard edges in the middle of this thing. You want these to be a little softer. Okay, so you see I've got a positive tree, I've got some negative trees, and up here in the top I'm going to come back now with my, well, that's drying a little bit. I'm going to come back and put in a few more of these. I'm scumbling now with this brush to put in some orangish brown, if you will. So I'm just going to let this sort of blend and run together in some of these areas, overlap the trees. I'm going to have to put some green in here eventually, but right now I just want to let this work and see how this starts filling out some of this area. Run this off with the paper over here. By using the back side of this brush, I can let those leaves really look light and airy. Okay, so that's a good bit of work there. We got some more bright orange here. Get some more of that orange in and sort of run it over here. It actually runs across and it gets onto these trees over here. Okay, I don't want to duplicate too much up here. I don't want to clone too much. Greg is here. Hi, Greg. Welcome. Okay, so I'm just sort of working on this now as sort of my second layer. I'm going to go in and get some of these yellows now. Oops, I had a lot of brown on my brush. Get rid of that. A lot of this yellow, lemon yellow, cad lemon yellow. And I'll start putting some of it in here, in this areas here. Need more paint. These all come back like this and start going off the page. Pick up a few other colors in here. A little bit of this orange can come in here again. And get some of this orange with a little bit of burnt sienna in it, which will give me another tone. If I get another value in here, I start getting more three-dimensionality. You see I have a light yellow, a medium yellow, and now I've got this yellow that's got a little bit of burnt sienna in it, and it gives me a third value. If you can get 3 values in some of your objects, whatever they are, a house, a boat, a tree, a door, a person, if you can get 3 values, you can demonstrate 3-dimensionality. And that's what some of this is kind of doing here for me. More bright yellow in there. Go back and get some more of that yellow. So I'm consciously letting that dry while I'm working over here, so that I don't end up with a lot of blossoms and problems with paint being too wet in the wrong place. A lot of learning how to paint is knowing how wet your brush is, how wet the paper is, how wet the paint is, and then using those to maximum advantage. So I have a nice little hole here. Got a couple of holes up here. We'll let those darken it down a little bit. I'm going to try to make this to be sort of the focal point if I can. I'm going to have to get some more darks in there. But right now I'm just going to throw these in and try to get some more of this brownish color. Throw some orange in. These trees are beautiful. This is really a beautiful photograph. Hi, Glenn from Boise. Welcome. What's the difference? Greg asks, what's the difference between our oil paint brushes and watercolor brushes? Well, watercolor brushes are almost always either a natural fiber or natural fur, like sable is a very popular type of watercolor brush, but they're also very expensive. Most of them are made of nylon, or there is a version of nylon brushes for watercolor called Taclon. It's nylon that's been baked, and it has a lot of the properties of the natural fur, natural hair brushes that people pay so much money for. Oil brushes are almost always bristle brushes, and they're made of, the ones I use are made of like hog hair or something like that, but they also have oil brushes, like I have some of them that are made of synthetic mongoose. I think you've seen me paint with those last time. So they can be anything, but the oil brushes have to stand up to quite a bit more stress than watercolor brushes, because you're basically only using water to wash these brushes out and to mix paints. And oil, you're using solvents of some kind to take the paint out to clean them. So they're usually tougher. But the interesting thing I'm doing here, as you may have noticed, is that I use bristle brushes with my watercolor. Sterling Edwards picked this up from another artist who had painted only with watercolor or oil bristle brushes in his watercolors, and it was kind of unknown or unheard of at the time. But there's so many things you can do with these bristles when you treat them like a paintbrush, like a watercolor paintbrush. I'll show you what I mean in a little bit. When I put some grasses in here, I'll be able to take this brush, and when I flick it up like that, you'll see every bristle in this watercolor or this bristle brush, every bristle becomes a little paintbrush, and you can just paint 1,000 strokes of grass with just one little flick of that brush. So it's a really neat way to do it. It's kind of fun, and it leaves some interesting shapes and interesting values and interesting marks on paper when you use those. So this is a little bit darker in here. I haven't put any green in this yet. I'm kind of holding off. But because I'm using transparent watercolors, you can see these positive tree trunks that I painted in. I'm having trouble covering that particular piece of paper. So what do I have to do? I use my brush, and I come in here and sort of scrape out a little bit of that, so I can put a little bit of a branch, or not a branch, but some leaves that overlap this particular part of the tree trunk. And by putting a bright orange or something in there, you can really block it out. The yellows will never block it out because they're too transparent, too thin. So I'm just kind of playing around here now. I'm not even really looking too much at the photograph, although there are some interesting things I want to copy from it. But so let's just keep putting this in here, keep going down, get some more yellows. Get more of this lemon yellow is a really bright yellow with has a lot of green in it. Let's just throw some down here. And so I'm kind of just blocking and using this brush to throw stuff in over here. Let these be the way they are. Okay, I'm going to come in now and pick up some more of this this color here, and we're going to go up and let's just continue making another little tree trunk back here that a couple of tree trunks that you didn't even know existed, but there they are. So this negative painting technique is kind of fun because you can put in these things that don't even look like they should be there, and all of a sudden you have some. You have a tree, a side of a tree. And using this big brush, you can take some of these things where you got too many hard edges and you can soften them up. You can take areas where you've got too much brown paint there that's not covering up and scrub it out. These bristle brushes will scrub that out. Okay. Over here in this area, I want to start working on, put my bigger brush here and see if I can make a little more of some more negative trees back here. So let's just go in here and put a little bit of this in and leave a little gap and make it come over to this tree. And go up here a little ways, and then we're going to leave room for a branch like this, and let that branch split out like that and split out like that. And all of a sudden you have the side of a tree branch there that you didn't have before. If I come on the other side and do something very similar, do this, maybe leave a little knot there that sticks out, and maybe even another branch over here on this side. And some other places here we can just throw in some things that look like some other tree branches. And okay, so there's the idea of the negative painting I was showing you a while ago, was just to make this very thin and soft, and leave those marks like that, and all of a sudden there's another tree sitting right there. And as that dries, I'll come back and show you some other things we can do with that. This area here, because it's not dark enough, as this dries, we can actually come back and put a darker color in and make another tree in there. I'll show you how that works in a minute when this all tends to dry off here. I'm going to throw in another couple of things here to make it look like we got another tree branch going up there, and maybe we'll put a positive branch in here, or positive trunk, so it looks like it might be connected to something below. All right, so there's a lot of that you can finish up. You can work on that and try these techniques of painting negatively and so forth. Yeah, Glenn, that's the idea with this negative and positive painting. It adds a lot of interest to a painting, and it just helps you see things. I mean, it's kind of I guess Sterling Edwards, I've heard him call that the beauty of watercolor, is that you can do stuff like that with watercolor, and it's really hard to do that with any other type of painting medium because you don't get the same effect. And so you can actually have positive part of a tree that connects to a negative part of the tree there. And so I'm giving the impression here that we have a lot of trees back here. And I'm also trying to give the impression that there's a lot of light back here hitting in this area. So as I darken this down some more, which I will do in a little bit, we'll be seeing the effect of that. Down here I'm just going to put in some base color. Sort of run this together and let it connect back there to look like it's sort of fading out into the sunlight or something. And it actually changed. I could actually make this path go right up that way if I wanted to, even though the road turns here and heads off in another direction. That might be okay to do it that way. I'm going to just go ahead and throw the back side of this road on, and here's the other side of it coming down this way. So you can see that we've got comes way out like that, and so that's sort of the path. And you see if I can pick up a little of this gray-green. This gray-green is a kind of a weird green-gray, I guess it's called. It's kind of a weird color. It's not a very pretty green, but when you mix it with different yellows and different blues, you get a lot of interesting colors out of it. How are we doing on time? Well, we're going pretty long, longer than I thought. That's okay. I've been taking my time and trying to explain things to you and showing you some of the techniques here that are kind of fun. Now this, what I was talking about before is where you can, I think that's too wet. Over here we can put in some of these things that look like grasses, right? And I can come back and put a few more below there and kind of run it into the side of the road here. We've got stuff going on there. I'm going to put in a few light areas here, put in some orange, and so that looks decent enough. Let's see here. We've got these other colors that sort of float across here like shadows. Over here there's a very dark shadow there. And so we've also got these greens over here on the side in here. I'm going to stipple that. See how I can make the, so this bristle brush, you can stipple and get like the tops of bushes here, or you can flick it like this and get grasses. So that's a neat technique to use with these bristle brushes. And so watercolors are fun, Rocky. You have to think differently. You have to paint differently. They basically, you do everything opposite of what you do in oil painting. In other words, you start from the lightest here and paint to the darkest. In oil painting, you typically start with the darkest and paint to the lightest and put highlights on. So that's sort of kind of why I do both oils and watercolors, is because I like the challenge of that idea that we're mixing both techniques. And I'm going to put a little of this in, let this kind of fade to white going in the back there. Okay, let's see what else. I've got a little bit of stuff to do to finish over here. And I won't do a whole lot more with this. I am going to come in and show you a few techniques here with the script liner brush. A lot of water, and so we'll just use this to sort of put in a few of these other limbs and sort of stuff like this. Let it come out. These things are going off the page. So it looks like there's a lot of stuff going on back here. a lot of trees. You want to see them when they go through these areas like this. It's always nice to see the little trunk or something come through there. You see something stick out up here once in a while and up at the top. So that's kind of the idea with, typically do that when you're about finished. I'm kind of showing it to you here before we're finished, but I want to get some of those in, let those dry, because I want to come and put some more darks over here. On this side, we got basically this one big tree, and there's a bunch of others floating around back here in the back. I'll throw some of this in for that. Just gives them something to paint over. Okay, now I'll come back and get my big 1-inch bristle brush and start picking up some greens. We've got a few greens in here I want to make. I want to get myself some heavy paint, and my yellow, lemon yellow, and this gray green, a little bit of purple maybe, and I get a color that's got some green in it. Okay, so we're going to put a few of these things in over here like this, and let them hang over the areas, let them come out and show up here in some other areas like this. Over here we've got a few that kind of come down. Kind of tying this together, I wanted to come show on both sides of the painting. Over here there's some more. So some trees back in here have got these green so I'm just dabbing with the back of the brush. Sort of an angular fashion, the way they might end up out there. Okay, let me see. I want to put a few, there's some down in here. Sort of fill this area in so it's not totally one color. I don't want it to look all, it's the same angle either. I want to try to get some. Okay, there are some grasses over here. I put some in already. I'm going to put a little more yellow in them. Even in here, I want to put in some of these that are light, much lighter. Okay. So these trees that have trunks that stick down like this, you want to put something under them to make them look like they're part of the scene. They're not just glued on. All right. And over here, let's see. Oh, I want to put this yellowish color in here. I want to put some more of that in. Take some of that out. I want it to lighten up back here as much as we can. Okay, a few more bright yellows at the top up here. That's sort of just one big glob of yellow. Put a few of those in up here. Let those stick out and hang over. Okay, something like that. See, leaving this white here in this bright area lets me put these really nice light leaves that sort of hang over and fill this space in and kind of pull it together in the background. Put some of this lighter yellow in here. Top of these greens. I'm getting another value. When I put this other value there, you see I'm getting a third value. Yeah, the greens really pop the trees. I'm going to put some more of that some more of that orange over there in a second. I want those to help stand out, show them off, I guess. Here, let's get some of this. So, some darks in here. As we come down, this should get really darker here at the bottom. And I'm just sort of coming back now, putting in another layer of my purple and my green together, and just putting in a little layer of dark around the edge of this road, because the darks make the lights show up. And in oil painting, you put the darks on and you put the highlights on top of them. Here I've got the lights on and I'm putting the dark on to highlight the lights. So that's the difference between oil and watercolor. One of the differences is that you put the darks on to make the lights show up. And in oil painting, it's kind of the reverse. So here I'm going to put some more dark down here. I'm just scumbling this in, not painting anything in particular. I'm just using this dark paint to make it look like there's something going on over there besides just, you know, light green color. You want some things in here too. Okay, now let's go back and get some more of my oranges. I'm going to come right back into this brilliant orange, and using my 1/2-inch brush, I'm going to see if I can put another brighter layer of orange and highlight some of these oranges to make them really pop. Okay, you see that? Is that making sense? So we really got a bright autumn tree here. I need plenty of that paint. I'm really using a lot of that brilliant orange. And so the scumbling helps just take off whatever's on the brush, and okay, another layer. So we're putting another layer on this thing with this, because that's a dry, and because I've got paint that doesn't have a lot of water in it here. It's a fairly dry paint. There is such a thing. Okay, so we're just going to run this off. Really make that pop. And down in here we've got some more. Wherever you've got some light, you can put some dark paint over it if you want to make it stand out. And okay, let's see. We had the other thing we had was have some leaves here falling by the roadside down here. We got this sort of a scumbly set of leaves floating around down here. And you got leaves falling over here. Put this other yellow in there to get a little bit different color. Again, this is rough texture. I'm just sort of scumbling it on, adding some, so that it doesn't look like it's just one brush stroke across there. I want it to look like it's something out there on the road that's looks like it might be leaves floating around out there. Okay. The other thing I wanted to try for you is to take this water and just take clear water and just throw some water on here, and clear water. I'm going to let that set for a few seconds. Normally I splatter, somehow I splatter, but if you take this and put it on, sort of blot it off like that, get some of the paint on here, but you can also then scrub and you'll start getting some things that look like Where'd they go? I don't see them. I think I had, paper's probably not dry enough to even do that. The idea is to take clear water and not getting much on there. There we go. Now I'll get some. So I'll see if that works. I'm going to put in some more calligraphy over here, put in some more trunks and branches and stuff to sort of fill this in while that's drying down there a little bit. I'm getting to the point where I need somebody to tell me to stop again. And I didn't come back and put any more darks over there, but see if I got some of this that popped off. I don't know. Doesn't look like it. Technique is supposed to take water and you put it on there and let it get into the paint, sort of loosen the paint a little bit. This Fabriano paper really has the ability to let you lift paint off very easily, and so you can do that, and you can actually lift off things that look like they're little, I don't know, things are growing there that are like white. It's like lifting off that paint based on the paint blobs that you put on. I'm not seeing any here. May not be getting enough water on there, I don't know. I don't know, it added a little more texture to that, I guess. Okay, I'm going to finish up here. I keep saying I'm done, but I keep finding one more thing to do. I'm going to come in this area here and see if I can put in another tree or two that's maybe negative. You do that by painting around. Again, you paint around it like this. Try to make it wider at the bottom if you can. Add some of the dark brown. Make sure the dark brown, if you put it up against something on this side, make sure it comes out on the other side. And so maybe something like that. And just a little more interest to it, so we have a little bit of that negative painting showing up over here. I think that's probably enough. Probably should stop. I may spend a few more minutes looking at this after I finish up with the broadcast, but I think I've shown you about everything I intended to show you here today, at least with the negative painting and with the sponge. I didn't really use a lot of sponge on this final painting. I want to put a little bit of color in here. These look a little bit too stark to me. I'm going to just put a very light glaze over a couple of these things so they don't detract too much from the focal point, which is over here. I want this to sort of be the area where your eye, when your eye comes in, I want it to go into this area here. There's not a lot interesting stuff there, but usually the lightest light against the darkest dark is where your eye will go. And I'm just going to leave a few more shadows back there in the distance, and put a few things this way to make it look like the road's coming this way, or the path. All right, folks, I'm going to say that's enough. I'm going to pick me up some color here on my... I'm glad to have you all here today. I'm going to put my name on this thing and call it finished. Okay. Okay, folks, I hope you like that. I hope you give this a chance, give it a try, and see if you can do the better job than me. I'm sure you can. But anyway, this has a little bit more depth in the photograph. I have a little bit of some of the watercolor techniques in there with this negative painting. And I did show you some sponges. I didn't use it on the final painting here. I kind of got wrapped up in my stippling with my dry brush, but I think it looks pretty decent. It's a good representation of that photograph. And so if you like this, why don't you share it with someone and subscribe if you're not a subscriber. And please check out my website for the photographs, the originals, and the grid. And also, if you like Antonio Romo's piano music at the beginning, give him a shout and check out his website. It's antonioromo.com, and he lets me use his music, and I appreciate it. So I think that's all I want to say to you now. And so until I see you again, this is Larry Hamilton saying so long for now. Bye-bye.